In the first moments after death, there's no darkness, no oblivion, only awareness. Cayce said that for most souls, the realization comes gently, like waking from a deep sleep. You look around and still see the same room, the same faces, yet something feels lighter. You're not bound by the weight of breath or heartbeat anymore. You think of moving, and suddenly you are already across the room. There's no pain, no struggle, only a quiet curiosity, as if your mind has been freed from gravity itself. This is the soul's awakening, the sacred second birth that Jesus spoke of when he said, "You must be born again." It isn't a metaphor for religion, it's the law of the Spirit. Cayce described how some souls, upon leaving the body, feel an instant pull upward, while others remain near the earth for a short while, depending on their attachment to material life. Those who lived with faith, compassion, and forgiveness ascend smoothly. Those consumed by anger, greed, or guilt feel a certain heaviness until they accept light and release the past. The soul doesn't face punishment, it faces truth. That truth is love, reflected back through every thought, every act, every moment we lived on earth. During these early moments, Cayce said that thought becomes creation. What you think, you see. What you fear, you meet. What you love, you attract. It's as if God gives you an immediate mirror to understand your spiritual condition. For those who cultivated love and humility, this reflection is beautiful beyond words. A river of light, warm and peaceful. For those who neglected love, it's a call to awaken, not a sentence of suffering. Every soul, no matter how lost, is still guided by divine mercy. The Bible echoes this when Jesus told the thief on the cross, "Today you will be with me in paradise." That promise wasn't for the righteous. It was for the repentant heart. Cayce confirmed that no soul is abandoned. Even in confusion or darkness, helpers of light, angels, family spirits, and guides stand ready. They don't judge, they remind. They whisper gently, "You are not your mistakes. You are loved. You are eternal." If this message touches your heart, pause for a second. Leave a like on this video so it reaches more souls who need peace about death. And write in the comments if you've ever felt a presence of someone who has passed. I'll mark every heart myself. Now, back to those sacred first minutes. Cayce said that when the soul realizes it's free, gratitude floods in. Many souls see a soft radiance, what he called the light of God's memory. It's not outside you, it's within you, expanding. You feel a pull toward that light because it feels like home. The transition is never random. Cayce said the state of your heart at the final breath shapes the path of the soul's awakening. A mind at peace attracts higher vibration. A restless spirit takes longer to recognize divine order. This is why forgiveness and faith matter so deeply while we're still here. They build the spiritual body that carries us forward. Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many mansions." Cayce interpreted that as realms of consciousness, planes of awareness where every soul continues its growth. The first moments after death are simply the doorway to one of those realms. He often compared death to walking through a fog that slowly clears. At first, shapes seem familiar yet distant. Then light breaks through, and the soul realizes it was never alone. Loved ones appear, not always as they looked physically, but radiant, whole, and vibrant. They come to comfort, not to cling. Cayce said they remind the new arrival that this is not the end but a continuation of purpose. Every soul is guided to review, to understand, and to prepare for the next lesson in its eternal journey toward oneness with God. In the next moments after death, the soul begins to feel drawn away from the world it once knew. Cayce explained that this is not a violent departure, but a natural return to vibration, like a wave flowing back to the ocean that gave it birth. Many souls sense a pathway of light forming ahead, a tunnel, a bridge, or sometimes a radiant field. These are not physical places, but symbols of movement toward higher consciousness. As the spirit moves through, the memories of pain and fear begin to dissolve, replaced by an overwhelming realization. Everything that ever existed was connected by love. This is the instant when the soul sees life from God's perspective, not as a series of random events, but as a carefully woven pattern of growth, forgiveness, and grace. Cayce said the soul often meets what he called the Hall of Records, a space of awareness where the soul reviews its earthly life. It's not a courtroom, it's a classroom. You see every choice not through shame but understanding. You feel what others felt because of your words, your kindness, or your neglect. It's God's perfect justice expressed through compassion. The soul recognizes that every joy and every sorrow was a lesson designed to awaken love. This is what the Bible means when it says, "You will reap what you sow." It is not punishment, it is divine education. Each act of love becomes light. Each act of cruelty becomes a call for healing. During this review, Cayce said, "The soul may hear voices of those it affected, but not in accusation. They speak through the vibration of thought, forgiving or inviting forgiveness. It's a conversation of the heart, not of the mouth." The soul then decides, in harmony with divine law, what it must experience next to continue evolving. Jesus spoke of this when he said, "Be perfect even as your Father in heaven is perfect." Perfection, in Cayce's interpretation, isn't about flawlessness. It's about returning to complete awareness of God's love. Each life, each death, is one more step toward that awakening. If you've ever lost someone and wondered if they can still feel your prayers, yes, they can. Cayce revealed that prayers of love and forgiveness act like light that reaches souls still adjusting to their new state. They sense that light and move toward it. That's why your prayers matter, not only for those living, but for those who have crossed over. When you speak their names with love, you help them find peace. So take a moment. If someone you love has passed, write their initials in the comments below as a silent prayer. I'll mark each with a heart, and together we'll send light to them. As the soul continues forward, the light becomes brighter, yet softer. It feels like returning to a place you've known forever. Cayce said that those who have prepared spiritually, through kindness, faith, and service, experience this transition as joy beyond words. They are greeted by guides, radiant beings who assist them in understanding where to go next. Some enter realms of rest, others move directly into dimensions of learning or service. It depends on the readiness of the soul, not on religious labels. Cayce often reminded that heaven and hell are states of mind, not locations. Heaven is awareness of God's love. Hell is separation from it. This truth echoes the parable of the prodigal son. The father never closed the door. The son simply had to remember the way home. Death is the same. No matter how far a soul has wandered, God waits with arms open, ready to receive. The first moments after death are God's gentle whisper saying, "Come home, my child. You were never lost." Cayce's readings remind us that we do not prepare for death by fearing it, but by living in alignment with Spirit now. The more love we practice on earth, the less fear we carry beyond it. As the soul rises further, Cayce said, it begins to sense harmony beyond anything known on earth. Time no longer feels linear. Instead, every moment feels eternal and filled with meaning. The soul begins to remember where it came from, its divine origin. Some described it as hearing a celestial music, not with ears but with consciousness itself, a vibration that resonates through every fiber of being. This music is the presence of God, the word spoken at creation, still echoing through eternity. Cayce connected this directly to the verse from John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. To the soul, this is no longer scripture, it's experience. In those first experiences of higher awareness, the soul understands that all separation was illusion. Every person, every life, every form of creation is one field of divine energy. Cayce often said that this realization is the beginning of true heaven. Heaven, he explained, isn't a golden city above the clouds. It's a state of unity where fear, guilt, and judgment dissolve completely. There is only light, understanding, and love. The soul is greeted by guides who help interpret what it sees, because the brightness can feel overwhelming. These guides are often the souls of loved ones or beings Cayce called the children of light, those who have served God through many lifetimes and now assist others. As the spirit grows comfortable in this realm, Cayce said, Christ himself may appear, not as a man in robes, but as radiant consciousness, pure compassion. The soul instantly recognizes him, no matter what religion it held on earth. His presence is not a test, it is homecoming. In his light, every pain dissolves, every question is answered. Cayce emphasized that Jesus is not the judge of souls, but their redeemer, the eternal pattern of divine love that lives within each of us. He is the bridge between human limitation and divine awareness. Meeting him in the afterlife is like remembering the truest part of yourself, the spark of God that never died. For those who lived without faith, Cayce said, the meeting with Christ is not punishment, but awakening. The light reveals who they really are, souls of infinite worth who simply forgot. Some turn away briefly, ashamed of their choices, but his compassion never changes. Come unto me, he says, all who are weary, and even in death they come, because in that realm, truth is irresistible. This is why Cayce urged people to seek God now, not through fear of judgment, but through love of truth. Death doesn't end our journey, it magnifies it. Every lesson unfinished in life becomes the first lesson of eternity. If this reflection brings peace to your heart, take a moment and share this video with someone who fears death. Let's fill the world with understanding instead of fear. Comment below how you imagine heaven feels. I'll heart your comment personally, because when we speak of the afterlife, we are also speaking of life itself. Cayce said the greatest discovery after death is that love is never wasted. Every prayer, every act of kindness, every tear shed for someone, it all lives on, forming the very substance of heaven. And perhaps the most beautiful truth of all is this: those you love are not gone. They are near, closer than breath. They visit you in dreams, in sudden warmth, in moments of peace you cannot explain. Cayce confirmed that the boundary between worlds is not a wall, but a veil, thin, luminous, and responsive to thought. When you think of them with love, they feel it. When you pray for them, it reaches them. And when you finally cross over, they will be there, waiting, smiling, saying, "We told you love never ends." As the soul continues its ascent, Cayce said it eventually reaches a point of perfect stillness, a place of awareness where all longing turns into understanding. Here, the soul no longer asks, "Why did this happen?" because it sees how every event, joyful or painful, was part of its divine education. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The truth is that life and death are two halves of the same breath. Nothing that was loved is ever lost. In that silence, the soul feels God not as a distant ruler, but as the essence within every heartbeat, every sunrise, every act of forgiveness. Cayce explained that once the soul regains clarity, it enters what he called the planes of preparation, realms where it rests, learns, and plans its next steps in the eternal journey. Some souls remain in these heavenly dimensions for what would seem like centuries in earthly time. Others, guided by compassion, choose to return to the material world to serve and grow. Reincarnation, in Cayce's words, is not a punishment, but a gift, another opportunity to express divine love more fully. Each life is a continuation of the last, shaped by choices and spiritual desires. It's God's way of giving us endless chances to learn how to love as He loves. In these higher planes, Cayce said, souls meet their spiritual families, groups that travel together through lifetimes, supporting one another's growth. Bonds of love never break, they simply shift across dimensions. That's why we feel deep, instant connections with some people on Earth. Our souls recognize them. We have walked together before. Cayce often reminded his followers that the relationships we build here continue after death, refined by forgiveness and strengthened by understanding. Heaven isn't solitude, it's reunion. The soul also learns that every thought creates vibration, and those vibrations shape worlds. Cayce described how souls help build spiritual environments suited to their level of consciousness. The purest souls live amid radiant beauty, where colors sing and light moves like music. Others dwell in gentler places of healing, where they rest and regain balance. But none are abandoned. All are moving toward the same divine center. It's as if creation itself is a vast classroom, and every soul is both student and teacher, learning that love is the only truth. And yet, Cayce insisted that the ultimate goal isn't to escape Earth forever. It's to bring heaven into the earth through how we live. He said, "Spirit is the life, mind is the builder, the physical is the result. Every thought of kindness, every act of service becomes a brick in the foundation of the world to come. When we forgive, we create light. When we love, we open a channel for God to act through us. Death reveals this truth instantly, but life gives us the chance to practice it daily. So, the next time you fear death, remember this. What Cayce and Jesus both taught is that there is no death, only transition. When the body rests, the soul continues. When the heart stops, love flows on. And when we finally awaken on the other side, we will realize that heaven was never far away. It was within us all along. Let this message fill you with peace. If it did, leave a comment saying, "I am eternal," and I'll heart each one myself. Together, we remind the world that no life, no soul, no love ever truly ends. And now, as this reflection comes to its close, imagine what Cayce wanted each of us to understand most deeply, that life is not about avoiding death, but about preparing to live forever. He said that every breath we take is a conversation between body and soul, a reminder that spirit is our true nature. The first moments after death only reveal what has always been hidden inside us, the divine spark that never fades. What we learn there, we are meant to practice here. Each act of forgiveness on earth builds a bridge of light in heaven. Each prayer whispered for another strengthens the bond between worlds. This is why Jesus taught, "The kingdom of God is within you." He wasn't speaking of a distant paradise, but of the consciousness that already connects us to eternity. Cayce often reminded his followers that heaven is not reached by dying, but by awakening. Every day we die a little to the illusions of fear, pride, and resentment, and we are reborn into greater awareness. The same process that happens in the first moments after death happens in small ways, every time we choose love instead of judgment. Every sunrise, every act of compassion is a rehearsal for eternity. When we leave this body, the transition will not frighten us, because we will have already learned to live in light. The goal is not to seek escape, but to align with God so completely that death itself becomes just another step in the dance of creation. Think of those you love who have gone before you. They are not lost, they are evolving. They cheer for you from realms of light, waiting for the day you will remember them in spirit. When you think of them, do not weep as if they are gone. Speak to them in prayer. Thank them for the lessons they gave you. Cayce said that when we think of those in spirit with gratitude, they draw closer, and both worlds are healed. So tonight, before you sleep, close your eyes and whisper, "We will meet again." Because in the design of God, love always fulfills its promise. Death is not the end, it is the opening of the eternal eye. The moment you let go, you awaken in the arms of the one who created you. The Bible says, "Neither death nor life nor anything else in all creation can separate us from the love of God." That is the final truth that Cayce confirmed over and over. Nothing real can ever be lost. Your soul is real. Your love is real. And God's plan for you is eternal. So live with courage, forgive often, and remember, when your first moments after death arrive, they will not be filled with fear, but with recognition. You will look upon the light and realize you've been home all along. If this message brought you peace, share this video with someone you love. Let's help the world see death not as the end, but as the continuation of life in its purest form. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to keep learning from the wisdom of Edgar Cayce and the teachings of Jesus Christ. And remember, one day when we open our eyes beyond this world, we'll finally understand that nothing dies, because love never does. Have you ever wondered what the soul looks like once it leaves the body? Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, gave us extraordinary insights into this mystery. He revealed that after death, we do not carry fabric or earthly clothes, but instead a spiritual garment that reflects the truth of who we are inside. Some souls shine with radiant robes of light, while others appear clothed in shadows, carrying the weight of their choices and thoughts. Cayce explained that our spiritual evolution is written in these garments. and they reveal whether we live in harmony with divine laws or still struggle with lower desires. This is not symbolism only, it is a mirror of the state of your soul. And here is something to reflect on. If your thoughts today shape the clothing of your soul tomorrow, what would your garment look like? Comment below how you imagine your soul would be seen after death, and I will mark each comment with a heart, because this conversation matters deeply. Stay until the end of this video, because what you are about to hear will forever change the way you see your life, your choices, and your eternal future. When Cayce spoke of life beyond death, he often described the soul not as a vague shadow, but as a being with form, radiance, and presence. He explained that after the physical body is released, the soul carries with it a spiritual body, sometimes called the etheric or astral form. This body is clothed, but not in fabric or woven material. Instead, it is clothed in the substance of thought, intention, and vibration. What a person has cultivated in their inner life becomes visible. Cayce said many times that thoughts are things, and nowhere is this more evident than in the state of the soul after death. The clothing of the spirit is not purchased, it is created moment by moment, through choices of kindness or cruelty, of love or bitterness, of faith or fear. In this way the soul cannot hide its reality, because its garment is simply the expression of its accumulated inner life. Cayce's descriptions reveal a profound truth. The spiritual world is governed by law, just as the physical world is. Just as gravity pulls us down, spiritual law reflects the state of our consciousness outwardly. Souls that nurtured patience, forgiveness, and devotion to God radiate garments of light, often seen as robes shining in brilliant white or soft golden tones. These are not metaphors, but manifestations of spiritual truth, observable to those already in the other world. On the other hand, souls burdened by anger, envy, or selfishness appear with darker, heavier coverings. Some even seem ragged or without clear form, because their own lack of spiritual harmony projects confusion and unrest. The robe of the soul is therefore a testimony, a silent witness that declares where the soul stands on its journey toward God. Cayce also explained that these garments are not permanent. They can change as the soul learns, grows, and sheds the lower tendencies that once defined it. In the same way that a person can repent, forgive, and heal during life, the soul after death can be guided by prayer, teaching, and love to transform its condition. The dark cloak of resentment can slowly give way to brighter clothing as forgiveness is embraced. This shows us that God's mercy never abandons anyone. Even in the realms of shadow, there is always the possibility of light. The garment is not punishment, but consequence, not condemnation, but revelation. It tells the truth of what has been cultivated, while leaving the door open for redemption. This truth has great weight for us while we are still alive. If every thought we cultivate, every habit we form, every word we speak is weaving the robe that our soul will wear, then life takes on a far deeper meaning. We are not just living for today's success or failure, but shaping the image we will carry into eternity. Cayce urged his listeners to take seriously the daily practice of prayer, meditation, kindness, and service, because these are the threads of light that become our clothing after the body is gone. Imagine standing before those you love in the next world, not able to cover yourself with appearance or masks, but revealed exactly as you are. What would your garment declare about you? This is not meant to frighten, but to awaken, to remind us that every choice carries eternal consequence. Cayce often said that the soul's garment is woven not by chance, but by law, and that law is love. Those who attune themselves to God's purposes appear radiant, their robes luminous, because their hearts have become channels for divine light. This is why in his readings he insisted so much on the daily alignment with spiritual ideals. He explained that choosing an ideal and holding it firmly, such as love, patience, or service, creates a current of thought that slowly reshapes the inner life. That current becomes visible after death, like threads of living light forming a cloak. Many who asked Cayce about loved ones who had passed received comfort in hearing that their souls were seen in light, already clothed in brightness, because of the lives they had lived with sincerity. But others were warned that without turning toward God, the soul could appear bound in shadows, its garment heavy, reflecting years of bitterness or pride left unresolved. One of the most remarkable aspects of Cayce's teaching is that no one is stuck forever in the garment they first appear in after death. He described realms of the spirit as places of learning, where souls are guided by helpers, teachers, and even loved ones who come in prayer to uplift them. The dark robe of guilt can, through prayer and growth, give way to brighter clothing. Yet he made clear that the process is not automatic. It requires willingness. A soul clinging stubbornly to anger or denial may remain in darkness, while one that opens in humility may quickly begin to shine. This teaching reveals both justice and mercy. Justice, because we cannot hide the truth of what we have sown. Mercy, because change is always possible. The garment is never fixed in stone but fluid, just like our thoughts and intentions. For those of us still here, the message is clear. Each act of forgiveness is like weaving a golden thread into our eternal robe. Each choice to pray instead of complain, to bless instead of curse, to serve instead of demand is another stitch of light. Cayce encouraged people to meditate daily, not just as a spiritual exercise, but as a way of feeding the soul with higher vibrations that become visible later. He even described that those who practiced sincere meditation and service appeared clothed in garments of radiant white, easily distinguished from others. He urged people not to waste time fearing death, but instead to use life as preparation, as the weaving loom where the soul crafts its future clothing. The way we live today is literally tailoring what we will wear tomorrow in eternity. Imagine this moment, leaving the body and stepping into a realm where nothing is hidden. Before you, other souls approach. Some shine like torches, their garments flowing in soft brilliance, peace radiating from them. Others seem grey, dim, their clothing thin or torn, as if weighed down by burdens they still carry. And then you see yourself, not in a mirror of glass, but in the clear reflection of spiritual law. You realize your soul wears exactly what it has built through a lifetime of thoughts and deeds. This realization is powerful, because it shows that we hold the tools now, while alive, to shape what will be revealed. Life is not meaningless. Every small act matters, because it becomes part of the fabric of our eternal appearance. In several of his readings, Cayce described the transition of souls who had just crossed over, and many of those accounts included vivid references to the appearance of their spiritual bodies. He told grieving families that their loved one was not lost, but clothed in garments that reflected peace or struggle, depending on the life they had lived. One reading described a man who had lived with devotion and service. Cayce said he appeared in robes of brightness, moving freely and joyfully into the realms of light. In another case, he spoke of a soul who was restless, clinging to material attachments, and therefore was seen in darker, heavier clothing, almost like a fog that clung to the body. These details were not given to frighten, but to encourage transformation while there was still time on earth. Cayce always reminded his clients that death does not erase what has been cultivated in the heart. It reveals it. What makes this teaching so profound is how it dissolves illusions. In the physical world, it is easy to put on a mask, expensive clothes, practiced smiles, outward success. But none of these survive death. The soul's garment cannot be borrowed or faked. It is the natural outcome of thought and intention. Cayce emphasized that in the spirit world, nothing external can hide what is within. Your robe is your character revealed. For many, this realization was a call to live with greater integrity, to align outer actions with inner ideals so that no contradiction would be exposed later. He warned that hypocrisy weaves a robe of confusion, while sincerity weaves a garment of clarity. This is why he often repeated that mind is the builder. It builds the house we live in here, and the robe we wear there. One of the most comforting aspects of Cayce's readings is that he described the helpers who meet souls after death. He said many souls are greeted by figures clothed in radiant garments, luminous beings who guide the newcomer with love and reassurance. These helpers do not judge by condemning words, but by presence. Their very brightness invites the soul to rise, to seek change, to leave behind its shadows. The contrast between the helper's robe of light and the newcomer's robe often stirs a deep desire for growth. Cayce explained that this is part of God's design, to allow souls to learn by reflection. Just as here on earth we are inspired by the example of others, So in the afterlife we are uplifted by the luminous garments of advanced souls who remind us of what is possible. For us who listen to these words today, the implication is powerful. Every moment of envy resisted, every choice to forgive instead of holding a grudge, every decision to give rather than to take, these are acts of tailoring. They are stitches in the robe of light we are destined to wear. And if we fail, if we stumble into anger, pride, or selfishness, we are still given the chance to change, to remove those threads and replace them with new ones. Cayce's vision is not a doctrine of despair, but of hope. He insisted that the soul is never abandoned, never condemned without possibility of change. The garment is a message, not a sentence, and its fabric can always be rewoven through repentance, love, and the grace of God. Cayce often connected his insights to the scriptures, showing that what he saw in his readings aligned with truths long recorded in the Bible. He pointed to the book of Revelation, where it speaks of the saints clothed in white robes, standing before the throne of God. For Cayce, this was not mere symbolism. It was a description of what the soul actually manifests when it has lived a life of faith, service, and love. The white robe is the visible sign of purity, the garment woven by choices aligned with divine law. He explained that those who stand in light do so not because of favoritism, but because of what they have built inwardly. Their robes shine because their souls shine. The biblical imagery of linen clean and white is the same truth he described in modern language, that the soul's condition is revealed through its clothing of light or shadow. At the same time, Cayce reminded his listeners that the darker garments mentioned in Scripture also correspond to real conditions. He warned that those who cling to anger, greed, or hatred after death may appear in robes of shadow, wandering in confusion until they are willing to release what binds them. This is not punishment from outside, but the natural outworking of spiritual law. Just as a tree bears fruit according to its kind, so the soul appears clothed according to what it has cultivated. Cayce often repeated that spiritual law is exact and cannot be escaped. But he also emphasized mercy. The soul is always invited to change, to be washed clean, to take on new garments. This echoes the biblical promise that though our sins be as scarlet, they can be made white as snow. He also connected these teachings with the parables of Jesus, particularly the parable of the wedding garment. In that story, the guest without a proper garment is cast out of the feast. Cayce explained that this does not mean God arbitrarily rejects, but that the garment is a symbol of the prepared soul. To enter the higher realms, one must be clothed in love, humility, and service. Without these qualities, the soul is simply not in harmony with the vibration of the feast. It cannot remain where it does not belong, not because it is excluded by force, but because it cannot endure the higher light until it has been transformed. Thus, the parable is not a threat, but a reminder. Prepare your garment now, while on earth, by living in harmony with divine law. For us, this means that spiritual practice is not optional decoration, but the very weaving of our eternal appearance. Cayce urged daily meditation, daily prayer, and daily service, because these are the actions that stitch light into the soul's robe. He warned against living carelessly, thinking that appearances here could substitute for true growth. He explained that after death, masks fall away, titles vanish, possessions are left behind, but the garment of the soul remains. It is the one thing we carry with us, because it is not external, but internal, the accumulation of what we truly are. When this is understood, life takes on new urgency. Every day is a chance to add a thread of light, to prepare the robe that will one day reveal us before God and others. Cayce's vision of the soul's garments is not meant to frighten us, but to awaken us. He wanted people to see that every moment matters because eternity is shaped in the present. When we choose anger, envy, or bitterness, we are sewing threads of shadow into our robe. When we choose compassion, humility, and truth, we are weaving light. This makes life on earth a sacred opportunity, a workshop where we prepare ourselves for what lies beyond. It is not about fear of punishment, but about responsibility and hope. You hold the needle every day, and with every thought and action you are sewing your eternal appearance. That is why Cayce insisted so often on the phrase, "Mind is the builder." Your mind is building not just your future in this world, but your garment in the next. He explained that when souls appear in radiant clothing, it is not because they were perfect, but because they chose to realign, to turn back to God even after failure. Many who once lived in shadow rose to light because they humbled themselves, asked for forgiveness, and practiced love. Their robes became brighter over time, reflecting their sincere change. This shows us that it is never too late to start. Even now, no matter what you have done, you can begin weaving a new robe. You can choose to release resentment, to forgive, to open your heart in prayer, and these choices will instantly begin changing your spiritual appearance. God's grace is like a cleansing river, and every soul is invited to wash its garment and make it new. Think of the moment when you leave this life. There will be no costumes, no roles, no masks, only the truth of your soul revealed in its garment. Loved ones may meet you, helpers may come in light, and your robe will declare your story. Will it shine with peace or carry the stains of what you refuse to let go? The answer is being written right now in the choices you make. This is not speculation. It is what Cayce saw again and again in his readings, and it places before you a question that cannot be ignored. What garment are you weaving for your eternity? This message is meant to stir your heart and call you to action. Reflect deeply on the life you are living. If you were to step beyond the veil tonight, what would your robe reveal? Share your thoughts in the comments because I want to hear from you. I will mark every comment with a heart, because this reflection is sacred and your voice matters. If this message touched you, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you do not miss the next teachings. Stay with us, because together we will keep unveiling the truths that Cayce left for the world, truths that can transform how we see life, death, and eternity itself. Imagine dying on a Tuesday morning at 3:47 a.m. and having absolutely no idea you're dead for 7 complete days. Picture trying to wake up your wife, wondering why she won't respond to you, attempting to go to work, confused when your colleagues can't see you. This is exactly what Edgar Cayce discovered happens to most people after death, and what I'm about to share with you today could completely transform how you prepare for the most important transition every single one of us will face. What I'm going to tell you comes from over 14,000 documented psychic readings that Edgar Cayce gave across 4 decades. His stenographer Gladys Davis recorded every single word for 21 years at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, and what she documented about the death process matches exactly what thousands of people report in near-death experiences today. If you're watching this, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because understanding what happens immediately after death could save your soul from the confusion and terror that most people experience. This isn't theory or religious speculation. These are documented revelations about what Cayce called the borderland state, and why 99% of people who die are completely unprepared for what awaits them in those crucial first 7 days. Let's walk through this experience based on what Cayce revealed. The heart attack strikes without any warning whatsoever. One moment you're reading in your study, the next you feel crushing chest pain and collapse onto the hardwood floor. But here's what nobody tells you about the actual moment of dying. The transition isn't immediate, clean, or peaceful like they show in movies. You find yourself standing beside your own physical body, watching paramedics work frantically to revive you, pumping your chest and shocking your heart with electricity. You keep trying to tell them you're fine, that you're right there next to them, perfectly conscious and aware. You can see your wife crying in the corner, observe every detail of the emergency room, hear every word the doctors speak. But when you try to touch the paramedic's shoulder to get his attention, your hand passes right through him like he's made of air. That's when the first wave of panic hits. Not physical panic because there's no more adrenaline or racing heart, but a deep soul-level terror that something is fundamentally wrong with reality itself. This is exactly what Edgar Cayce described in his archived readings from the 1940s, where he explained that souls who die suddenly often remain earthbound because they don't realize they've left their physical bodies. Cayce called this state that consciousness between the physical and spiritual planes, where entities may become confused as to their direction. He documented dozens of cases where souls spent weeks, months, or even years trapped in this confused state because they died without proper spiritual preparation. Let's continue with this experience. You spend the first 3 days of death trying desperately to continue your normal routine, becoming increasingly frustrated and terrified when nothing works as it should. You attempt to shower, wondering why the water doesn't feel wet against your skin. You try to eat breakfast, growing panicked when you can't taste anything or feel food in your mouth. You follow your wife around the house like a lost dog, desperate to comfort her as she sobs uncontrollably, but your attempted embraces pass right through her body. The most horrifying part is watching her make phone calls to tell family members you've died while you're standing right beside her, wanting to grab the phone and tell everyone she's making a terrible mistake. You can hear your own death being discussed in past tense, while you feel more alive and aware than you have in years. This is the beginning of what Cayce termed the borderland experience, a state of consciousness that exists between physical and spiritual dimensions. But wait, there's something even more disturbing about this state that Cayce revealed in his readings, and that direct experiences confirm in ways that nearly drive you insane. Time doesn't work the same way when you're dead. What feels like hours of trying to communicate with your family turns out to be entire days. You'll attempt to get your wife's attention for what seems like minutes, only to watch the sun set and rise again while you're still trying to make her see you. According to Cayce's documented readings from just before his own death in 1945, souls can remain in this confused borderland state for months or even years if they die without proper spiritual preparation. Fortunately, in this example I'm sharing, the confusion lasts only 7 days, but only because of something that had been studied years earlier about Edgar Cayce's work on consciousness and meditation. Picture this. On the second day of death, you try to drive to your office thinking that somehow returning to familiar routines will fix whatever is wrong. You sit in your car for what feels like hours, turning the key over and over, growing increasingly frantic when the engine won't start. Other drivers can't see you or your car. You watch people walk through the vehicle as if it doesn't exist. You begin to suspect you're having some kind of psychotic break, that you're lying in a coma somewhere and experiencing hallucinations. The terror intensifies when you realize you can't sleep. In life, you could always escape confusion or anxiety by sleeping, but death has removed that option. You're trapped in continuous consciousness with no relief, no escape from the growing realization that something catastrophic has happened to your existence. This is what Cayce described in his documented cases as souls being caught in waking sleep, fully conscious but unable to interact with the physical world they still believe they belong to. You watch your own funeral from the back of the church on the 4th day, still believing that you'll somehow return to your body and explain to everyone that there's been a mistake. You see your children crying, watch your grandchildren place flowers on your casket, observe hundreds of people paying their respects to your supposed remains, but you feel completely disconnected from the ceremony, like you're watching a movie about someone else's life. That's when something extraordinary happens that changes everything and saves you from potentially years of continued confusion. During the funeral service, your oldest daughter reads a passage from Edgar Cayce's readings about consciousness surviving death. As she speaks those words, you suddenly remember a specific teaching you'd studied years earlier, where Cayce described meditation as preparation for that state which every soul must eventually experience. You'd been meditating regularly for 15 years before death, though you never consciously connected it to preparing for this transition. But in that moment of remembering, as your daughter's voice echoes through the church, you begin to apply the same techniques you used in deep meditation, observing thoughts and feelings without attachment, accepting your situation without resistance, and focusing on pure awareness rather than trying to control external circumstances. That's when everything shifts dramatically. The confusion begins to clear like fog lifting from a lake, and you start to understand what Cayce meant when he described the borderland as a state between physical and spiritual dimensions. You weren't trapped, you were in transition. Your desperate attachment to your previous life, your frantic attempts to return to familiar routines, had been keeping you stuck in this intermediate state through your own refusal to accept what had happened. Here's what Cayce revealed in his archived readings that proves absolutely true. The quality of your spiritual development during physical life directly determines how smoothly you navigate the death transition. In his documented cases from the 1940s, he stated clearly that the more an entity has prepared itself through spiritual development, the quicker the transition. Souls who have practiced conscious separation from physical identification during life maintain awareness and purpose throughout the death process. Once you stop fighting your situation and apply the spiritual principles you'd learned from studying Cayce's work, your 7-day ordeal begins to transform into something remarkable and beautiful. You start to perceive what Cayce called the cosmic classroom, a space where you can review your entire lifetime from a spiritual perspective that transcends your previous limited understanding. But wait, this life review isn't just remembering events like watching home movies. It's experiencing every moment of your 73 years from the perspective of everyone you'd ever affected, feeling the emotional impact of your choices from the receiving end. You feel the pure joy you brought to your children when you taught them to ride bicycles, and you also experience the deep hurt you caused your wife during your worst arguments from her emotional perspective. This is what Cayce described in his documented readings as seeing your lifetime from the receiving end of every choice you made. You experience the ripple effects of your kindness extending to people you'd never even met. How helping an elderly neighbor with groceries had inspired her to help others, creating a chain of kindness that affected dozens of lives. But you also feel the pain you caused through impatience, selfishness, and fear, understanding for the first time how your negative emotions had created suffering that extended far beyond what you'd realized during your physical lifetime. The review process is both humbling and enlightening, showing that every single choice we make as incarnated souls has cosmic significance. There are no private thoughts or insignificant actions. Everything affects the overall development of consciousness throughout the universe. This isn't punishment or judgment. It's education about the true nature of reality and our interconnectedness with all other souls. According to Cayce's documented readings, this life review determines what lessons still need to be learned and what opportunities await in future incarnations. Souls who complete this review with acceptance and understanding gain what he called selective reincarnation, the ability to consciously choose their next lifetime's circumstances based on their soul's development needs, rather than being drawn into situations by unresolved karma or emotional attachments. During this review, you begin to understand why you'd been drawn to Edgar Cayce's work during your physical lifetime. In his readings from the 1940s, Cayce predicted that souls who studied spiritual principles during life would often take on teaching roles after death, serving as guides for other souls navigating their own transitions. You realize you're being prepared for a specific purpose in the spiritual dimensions, to help other souls avoid the confusion and terror you experienced during your first days of death. Here's something absolutely extraordinary that Cayce revealed in his readings, and that direct experiences confirm. Advanced souls who complete their borderland transition consciously can choose to serve as guides for other souls going through their own death experience. On the 6th day of this transition, you encounter what Cayce called borderland teachers, souls who had successfully navigated their own deaths and chosen to help others rather than immediately moving on to their next incarnation. These guides aren't ethereal beings or traditional angels. They're people just like us who died and evolved their consciousness enough to serve in this capacity. One of them had been a nurse during her physical lifetime and had spent 40 years helping souls transition through the borderland. Another had been a meditation teacher who specialized in helping confused souls remember their spiritual training. They help you understand that confusion and fear during the first days of death are completely normal and that you're progressing exactly as you should. But wait, there's something even more remarkable about this guidance system that validates everything Cayce taught about consciousness and service. These borderland teachers explain that they'd all studied spiritual principles during their physical lifetimes, just as you had studied Cayce's work. Their preparation during life, through meditation, service to others, and conscious spiritual development, had enabled them to maintain awareness and purpose throughout their death transition instead of getting lost in confusion. In Cayce's documented teachings, he described how souls who practiced what he called dying daily through meditation could experience conscious dying when their physical body actually died. This was exactly what these guides had achieved. They had died with full awareness and immediately began their spiritual service rather than spending weeks or months trapped in the borderland state. The nurse who guides you explains that she's been working in the borderland dimensions for over 20 years of Earth time, helping thousands of souls navigate their death transitions. She tells you that the number of souls dying with spiritual preparation has increased dramatically in recent decades, creating a growing network of conscious guides available to help others. This matches Cayce's predictions about humanity's spiritual evolution and the approaching age of heightened consciousness. On the seventh day of death, something profound happens that changes your entire understanding of existence and cosmic purpose. You are given a choice that Cayce had described in his readings, but that you never fully comprehended until experiencing it yourself. You can choose to reincarnate quickly to continue learning specific lessons in physical form, or you can remain in the spiritual dimensions to serve as a guide for other transitioning souls. The decision isn't made from emotion or attachment, but from a clear understanding of what would best serve your soul's evolution and how you could contribute to the cosmic development of consciousness. This is what Cayce meant in his documented cases when he described spiritually developed souls gaining the ability to make conscious choices about their continued existence, rather than being automatically drawn into the next incarnation by karmic needs. In this example, you choose to remain as a borderland teacher, at least temporarily. Part of your service involves communicating information about the death process to living souls who are open to receiving it through dreams, meditation, and intuitive inspiration. This is how information like this reaches us, through individuals who have developed enough spiritual sensitivity to receive guidance from souls in the spiritual dimensions. Here's what we desperately need to understand about preparing for our own inevitable death transition. Everything Edgar Cayce taught about spiritual development during physical life is absolutely crucial for navigating what awaits us after death. Our meditation practice, our service to others, our study of spiritual principles, our development of universal love and compassion, these aren't just ways to improve our current life. They're preparation for the most important transition our consciousness will ever make. In the current role as a borderland guide, this soul has helped dozens of others who died completely unprepared for what they experienced. They spent weeks or months trapped in confusion, similar to this 7-day example, trying to return to physical routines that no longer existed, unable to move forward in their spiritual evolution because they'd never developed the consciousness necessary for smooth transition. Some had been religious, but had never practiced meditation or conscious spiritual development. Others had been materialists who completely denied the survival of consciousness after death. But this guide has also helped souls who had prepared during their lifetime through meditation, spiritual study, and service to others. These souls moved through the borderland experience with awareness and grace, immediately beginning their next phase of spiritual development, rather than getting stuck in confusion and fear. The difference in their experiences was directly related to their level of spiritual preparation during physical incarnation. What Cayce revealed in his archived teachings about meditation being dying daily is literally accurate from this perspective. Every time you successfully separate your awareness from identification with your physical body and mental chatter during meditation, you're rehearsing for your death transition. You're developing the spiritual muscle memory you'll need to maintain consciousness and purpose when you leave your physical form. But here's something even more important learned from this perspective. The love and spiritual support of living family members can significantly impact a soul's borderland experience. In Cayce's documented cases from the 1930s, he described how a mother's conscious blessing and spiritual understanding helped her deceased son complete his transition more smoothly and quickly. When the wife in our example finally learned to release with love while still honoring the memory, there was a profound shift in the ability to serve in the new role. Her spiritual understanding and conscious support actually enhanced effectiveness as a borderland guide. This demonstrates how interconnected consciousness really is. Our spiritual development affects not just our own evolution, but the evolution of souls we love who have already transitioned. Here's what you need to know about supporting your deceased loved ones. Excessive grief, denial of their death, or desperate attempts to maintain personal contact can actually hinder their spiritual progress and keep them trapped in the borderland longer than necessary. What truly helps is conscious love and blessing for their highest spiritual development, even when that means accepting their transition to states of existence we can't currently perceive or understand. From this current perspective, you can see how every aspect of physical lifetime was preparing for this role. The study of Edgar Cayce's work, the 15 years of daily meditation practice, the attempts to serve others through volunteer work and charitable giving, all of it was developing the consciousness needed to navigate the death transition successfully and take on spiritual service in the borderland dimensions. But wait, there's something absolutely crucial about timing and cosmic purpose that needs to be understood. The borderland experience isn't just about individual souls, it's part of a larger spiritual awakening happening on Earth right now. More souls are dying with spiritual preparation than ever before in human history, creating a growing network of conscious guides available to help others through their transitions. According to what's been learned in this current role, this is directly connected to what Cayce predicted in his readings about humanity's spiritual evolution and the dawning of what he called the Age of Aquarius, a period when consciousness itself would expand and death would become less of a traumatic ending and more of a conscious graduation to expanded spiritual service. Your spiritual development right now isn't just personal growth, it's preparation for cosmic service that extends far beyond your current physical incarnation. Every meditation session, every act of selfless service, every moment of genuine love and compassion is developing qualities of consciousness that will determine your experience throughout all phases of your eternal existence. The most important thing that can be shared from this experience is that death is not the end of consciousness. It's a transition to expanded awareness and opportunity for spiritual service. But the quality of that transition and the level of service you'll be able to provide depends entirely on the spiritual preparation you do, while you still have the incredible advantage of physical incarnation to accelerate your development. Edgar Cayce's readings provide specific guidance for this preparation. In his documented teachings from the 1940s, he recommended daily meditation as the most important practice for developing the consciousness needed for smooth death transition. In other archived readings, he emphasized service to others as crucial for developing the universal love that allows souls to serve effectively in the spiritual dimensions. The 7 days of confusion experienced in this example teaches us that Edgar Cayce's revelations about consciousness and spiritual preparation are absolutely accurate and vitally important. His over 14,000 documented readings provide a complete roadmap for conscious spiritual evolution that continues beyond physical death and extends throughout all phases of soul development. If you're serious about your spiritual evolution, study Cayce's work while you still have the incredible opportunity of physical incarnation. Practice meditation daily as preparation for conscious dying. Develop universal love and compassion through consistent service to others. Study spiritual principles not just intellectually, but as practical preparation for your eternal journey. These aren't just suggestions for a better life. They're requirements for smooth spiritual transition and meaningful cosmic service. The choice you make right now about your spiritual development will determine whether you spend days, weeks, or months trapped in confusion like this example, or whether you navigate your death transition with consciousness and immediately begin your next phase of spiritual service. Make sure you subscribe for more insights about consciousness and spiritual preparation based on Edgar Cayce's documented revelations. Like this video if it's opened your mind to the reality of consciousness beyond death and the importance of spiritual preparation. Share it with others who are ready to approach their spiritual development with the urgency and dedication it truly deserves. Your death transition is coming whether you're prepared or not. The question isn't if you'll die, it's whether you'll be ready when that moment arrives. Will you spend precious time trapped in confusion and terror, or will you move through the transition with consciousness and purpose, immediately beginning your service to other souls who need guidance? The answer depends entirely on the spiritual work you choose to do while you still have a physical body to accelerate your development. The borderland is waiting, And there are souls there who desperately need guides who understand what they're experiencing. Are you preparing yourself to serve them when your time comes? The 7 days of confusion experienced could have been 7 years if there hadn't been remembrance of Cayce's teachings about meditation and spiritual preparation. Don't let that happen to you. Start your preparation today, because your eternal soul journey is more important than anything else you'll ever undertake, and it's happening right now, whether you're conscious of it or not. But here's what makes this absolutely urgent for every single person watching this video. We're living in a time that Edgar Cayce specifically predicted would be crucial for humanity's spiritual evolution. In his readings from the 1930s and 1940s, he described our current era as a period when more souls would awaken to their spiritual nature than ever before in human history. This isn't coincidence, it's cosmic timing. What Cayce revealed about consciousness and death isn't just ancient wisdom, it's practical preparation for what every single one of us will face. The borderland experience is universal. Whether you believe in Cayce's psychic abilities or not, the consistency between his documented readings and modern near-death experience research is undeniable. Thousands of people who've clinically died and returned describe exactly the same stages of transition that Cayce mapped out decades ago. Think about this. If there's even a possibility that consciousness continues after physical death, wouldn't it be absolutely insane not to prepare for it? We spend years preparing for careers that last maybe 40 years, but we spend almost no time preparing for a transition that determines our eternal existence. This is the ultimate insurance policy for your soul. The most shocking part of Cayce's revelations isn't that consciousness survives death. It's that most people waste their death transition because they're completely unprepared for it. Imagine having the opportunity to consciously choose your next incarnation, to serve as a spiritual guide, to participate in the cosmic evolution of consciousness itself, but instead, spending months or years trapped in confusion because you never developed the spiritual awareness necessary to navigate the transition. This is happening to millions of souls right now. They're dying every day without spiritual preparation, getting trapped in the borderland state that Cayce described, unable to move forward because they never learned how to separate their consciousness from physical identification. They become what Cayce called earthbound entities, stuck between worlds, often for decades of Earth time. But here's the incredible opportunity. Everything you need to prepare for conscious death transition is available right now. Cayce's complete readings are archived and accessible. Meditation techniques that prepare your consciousness for separation from physical identification can be learned and practiced. The principles of spiritual development that create smooth death transitions are documented and teachable. The question is, are you going to take this seriously, or are you going to hope that everything works out somehow when your time comes? Because hoping isn't a strategy when it comes to consciousness transition. This is too important to leave to chance. What I find absolutely fascinating about Cayce's work is how precisely his descriptions match what people report in near-death experiences today. Dr. Raymond Moody, Dr. Kenneth Ring, Dr. Pim van Lommel. All the leading researchers in near-death studies have documented the same stages that Cayce described: separation from the physical body, movement through a transitional space, encounter with spiritual beings, life review experiences, and choice about returning or continuing forward. But here's what makes Cayce's contribution unique. He didn't just describe these stages, he provided practical guidance for navigating them consciously. His readings contain specific instructions for spiritual preparation, meditation techniques for developing consciousness beyond physical identification, and principles for developing the universal love that enables cosmic service after death. This isn't religious doctrine, it's practical spirituality with measurable results. People who follow Cayce's guidance for spiritual development report more vivid spiritual experiences, greater intuitive abilities, improved healing capacities, and most importantly, reduced fear of death because they understand it as a transition rather than an ending. The 7-day borderland experience I've described isn't worst-case scenario. It's actually relatively quick compared to what many unprepared souls experience. Cayce documented cases of souls remaining confused for years, decades, even centuries, because they couldn't accept their death or move beyond attachment to physical existence. But he also documented cases of highly developed souls who navigated the death transition instantly, maintaining full consciousness throughout the process and immediately taking on roles as spiritual teachers and guides. The difference wasn't random, it was directly related to their spiritual preparation during physical life. This brings us to the most practical question. What specific steps can you take right now to prepare for conscious death transition? Based on Cayce's documented readings and modern research into consciousness, here are the essential practices. First, develop a consistent meditation practice focused on separating awareness from physical identification. This isn't about achieving mystical states, it's about learning to observe thoughts and feelings without being controlled by them. Every successful meditation session is practice for maintaining consciousness beyond physical death. Second, study spiritual principles not just intellectually but experientially. Read Cayce's materials, explore near-death experience research, learn about consciousness from multiple spiritual traditions. The more you understand about the nature of consciousness and spiritual reality, the better prepared you'll be to navigate non-physical states. Third, develop what Cayce called universal love through service to others. This isn't just being nice, it's developing the capacity to love without attachment, to serve without expecting return, to genuinely care about the spiritual development of all souls. This quality of love is essential for effective service in the spiritual dimensions. Fourth, practice conscious dying while living. This means regularly examining your life from a spiritual perspective, releasing attachments to material possessions and ego identifications, and aligning your choices with your soul's highest development rather than temporary physical desires. Fifth, study your own consciousness through dream work, intuitive development, and exploration of expanded states of awareness. The more familiar you become with non-ordinary consciousness while incarnated, the less confusing the death transition will be. These practices aren't just preparation for death, they're also preparation for a more conscious, fulfilling, and spiritually meaningful life right now. But their ultimate purpose is preparing your consciousness for the most important transition you'll ever make. The urgency of this preparation cannot be overstated. We don't know when our death transition will occur. It could be today, tomorrow, or decades from now, but whenever it happens, it will be the most important moment in your soul's existence. Are you going to be ready for it? The choice is yours, and it's happening right now with every decision you make about your spiritual development. You can continue living as if death is some distant possibility that you'll deal with later, or you can recognize it as the inevitable transition that requires serious preparation starting immediately. Edgar Cayce's greatest gift to humanity wasn't his psychic abilities. It was his documentation of the spiritual principles that govern consciousness development and death transition. These principles are available to everyone, regardless of their beliefs about Cayce himself. The question is whether you're going to use them or ignore them. Your eternal soul journey is too important to leave to chance. Start your preparation today, because the borderland is waiting. And how you navigate it will determine your spiritual opportunities for lifetimes to come. Edgar Cayce told desperate families throughout the 1930s that their dying children could recover through his specific remedies involving castor oil packs and dietary changes. In documented case after documented case, children given days to live by doctors made full recoveries when families followed his exact instructions. But here's what's even more shocking about these cases. They weren't just about physical healing. The sleeping prophet, as he became known, spent 43 years channeling information that would challenge everything we think we know about life, death, and what happens in between. With over 14,000 documented readings recorded by stenographers and preserved in Virginia Beach, Cayce's work represents the most extensive collection of psychic material ever assembled by one person. But wait, here's where it gets really interesting. In reading after reading, the same messages kept coming through from those who had crossed over. 10 specific things that the deceased desperately wanted the living to understand. If you're ready to discover what your loved ones are trying to tell you from the other side, hit that subscribe button now, because this information could change how you view death forever. The first thing the dead want you to know will shock you. They're not really gone. In documented cases throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Cayce was asked about recently deceased family members. What came through shocked even his stenographer. The deceased weren't just present during the readings, they were actively participating, giving specific details about family matters that only they could have known, including locations of important papers their families couldn't find. This wasn't unusual for Cayce. Throughout thousands of readings, he consistently reported that consciousness survives physical death intact. The personality, memories, and emotional connections remain. Death, according to what came through Cayce's readings, is simply a change of address, not an ending. But here's what terrified some of his clients. The dead were often more aware of earthly situations than when they were alive. They could see the bigger picture, understand family dynamics more clearly, and desperately wanted to help their loved ones navigate challenges. Think about this for a moment. Right now, as you're watching this, according to Cayce's findings, deceased loved ones may be more present in your life than they ever were when walking beside you. They want you to stop grieving so intensely. In multiple emotionally charged readings, Cayce channeled fathers who had died in accidents. The messages that came through were urgent and clear. Excessive grief from their families was actually holding these deceased fathers back from progressing spiritually. This revelation appeared consistently in Cayce's work. The dead understand that grief is natural and necessary, but prolonged intense mourning creates energetic bonds that can impede their spiritual development. They want their loved ones to know they're safe, they're learning, and they're growing. But wait, here's the part that changes everything about how we should handle loss. The deceased repeatedly communicated through Cayce that celebration of their life and memories actually helps them advance spiritually, while prolonged despair creates confusion and delays their progress. They want to be remembered with joy, not chains of sorrow. In 3 minutes, I'll reveal the case that terrified even Cayce's assistants. But first, you need to understand what the dead say about unfinished business. Forgiveness is their biggest concern. During the war years, Cayce conducted numerous readings for families who had lost soldiers. One consistent message emerged. The deceased were deeply concerned about unresolved conflicts and unforgiveness between family members. In a reading that shocked his stenographer, a deceased soldier communicated that watching his family torn apart by old grudges was causing him more pain than his death had caused them. The dead, according to Cayce's extensive archives, maintain emotional connections to their loved ones and suffer when they witness ongoing family dysfunction. But here's what's fascinating. They also have expanded perspective on these conflicts. They can see how petty many arguments were, how pride and ego destroyed relationships unnecessarily. They desperately want their loved ones to forgive each other and themselves. The dead understand something the living often miss, that holding grudges only hurts the person carrying the anger. From their expanded awareness, they see how forgiveness liberates not just the forgiven, but especially the forgiver. They're trying to send signs. In documented cases throughout the 1930s, Cayce repeatedly accessed information showing that the deceased actively attempt to communicate with their loved ones through various signs and synchronicities. But here's the problem: most people dismiss these attempts as coincidence. According to archived readings, the dead work within natural laws to create meaningful coincidences, influence dreams, and arrange for specific songs, numbers, or symbols to appear at precisely the right moments. They understand the spiritual mechanics of how consciousness can influence physical reality. But wait, this is where Cayce discovered something that will give you chills. The deceased reported through his readings that modern life's distractions and skepticism make it increasingly difficult for them to get through to their loved ones. They have to work harder and be more creative to capture attention in our noisy, disconnected world. Your prayers and thoughts reach them. In one of his most documented cases, Cayce channeled a grandmother who specifically mentioned the prayers her granddaughter said for her every night. She described feeling strengthened by these loving thoughts and explained how they actually helped her spiritual progress. This pattern appeared consistently. The dead receive and benefit from the loving thoughts, prayers, and positive intentions sent their way by the living. These spiritual connections transcend physical death and create real energetic support for those transitioning to higher realms. Here's what Cayce's work revealed that most people don't realize. Your thoughts about deceased loved ones aren't just private memories. They're active communications that provide comfort, strength, and assistance to those learning to navigate their new existence. But here's the case that terrified even Cayce's most experienced assistants. They warn about spiritual dangers. During a session in 1936, something unprecedented happened. A deceased father came through with urgent warnings about his living son's involvement with dangerous occult practices. The message was so intense and specific about spiritual dangers that Cayce's stenographer later said she felt physically cold during the entire reading. The archives contain multiple instances where the deceased warned their loved ones about spiritual practices, relationships, or decisions that could lead to harmful consequences. From their expanded awareness, they could see spiritual realities invisible to those still in physical form. According to Cayce's documented work, the dead understand that consciousness continues after death, which means choices about spiritual practices, moral decisions, and character development have eternal consequences. They desperately want to protect their loved ones from spiritual harm. They understand the purpose of suffering. In reading after reading, Cayce accessed information showing that the deceased gain expanded understanding about why certain challenges, illnesses, and losses occur during earthly life. What seemed random or cruel from the limited human perspective reveals itself as purposeful from their elevated awareness. A documented case from the late 1930s involved a mother who had lost multiple children to illness. Through Cayce's reading, these children communicated that their brief lives had served specific spiritual purposes, both for their own soul development and for their family's spiritual growth. This doesn't mean the dead are callous about earthly suffering. Rather, they understand the bigger picture of how souls use physical experiences for learning and growth. They want their loved ones to know that no suffering is meaningless, even when its purpose isn't immediately apparent. They're preparing a place for you. In verified cases throughout Cayce's career, the deceased consistently communicated that they actively prepare for eventual reunions with their loved ones. This isn't passive waiting. They're engaged in learning and developing capabilities that will enhance these future meetings. According to archived readings, those who cross over often describe continued relationships with other deceased family members and friends. They form spiritual communities where they support each other's development and plan for how to assist and eventually reunite with loved ones still in physical form. But here's what will blow your mind about this preparation process. The dead reportedly use their expanded awareness to help orchestrate events and opportunities in their loved ones' lives. From their higher perspective, they can see possibilities and connections invisible to physical awareness, and they work to help create beneficial circumstances. Reincarnation is real, and relationships continue. Throughout thousands of past life readings, Cayce consistently accessed information showing that souls reincarnate to continue learning and that significant relationships span multiple lifetimes. The deceased understand this continuity and often referenced previous incarnations together with their living loved ones. In documented cases, the dead communicated that current relationships are part of ongoing spiritual partnerships designed to help all participants grow and evolve. They see beyond the temporary separation of physical death to the eternal nature of love and connection. This perspective radically changes how we understand loss. According to Cayce's extensive archives, death represents a temporary separation in an eternal relationship, not an ending. The consciousness that loves you now will continue to love you across lifetimes. They want you to develop your spiritual gifts. In one of his most revealing readings, Cayce channeled a deceased spiritualist who urged her living daughter to develop her own psychic abilities. The message emphasized that everyone possesses intuitive capabilities, but most people ignore or suppress these spiritual gifts. The archives contain numerous instances where the deceased encouraged their loved ones to meditate, pray, study spiritual teachings, and practice developing their own direct connection to higher realms. They understand that spiritual development is the most important work anyone can do during physical life. From their expanded awareness, the dead see how spiritual gifts can transform earthly life. bringing guidance, healing, peace, and purpose. They desperately want their loved ones to access these same capabilities while still in physical form. But here's the final message that appeared in reading after reading, and it's the most important thing the dead want you to understand. The consistent message throughout Cayce's documented work was that love truly is eternal, and that consciousness continues to grow and develop after physical death. The deceased want their loved ones to live fully, love deeply, forgive completely, and develop spiritually while still having the opportunity of physical incarnation. They see earthly life as a precious opportunity for spiritual growth that shouldn't be wasted on trivial concerns, ongoing resentments, or spiritual neglect. Every day in physical form offers chances for learning, service, and soul development that the deceased wish they had appreciated more fully while alive. Death, according to what consistently came through Cayce's readings, is not the opposite of life. It's the continuation of consciousness in a different form. The relationships, love, and spiritual connections formed during earthly life continue beyond physical death, growing stronger and more meaningful as both the living and dead continue their eternal journey of spiritual evolution. Your deceased loved ones want you to know they're safe, they're growing, they love you eternally, and they're waiting to share with you everything they've learned when your time comes to join them in expanded awareness. The most documented psychic in human history spent 43 years proving that consciousness survives death and that love transcends every boundary, including the grave. These aren't just comforting beliefs. According to Cayce's extensive archives, they're spiritual realities verified through thousands of documented readings. If this information has opened your mind to possibilities you've never considered, subscribe now for more revelations from Edgar Cayce's extraordinary legacy. Like this video if it's helped you understand death and spiritual continuation in a new way, and share it with anyone who needs to know that their loved ones are truly not gone. They're just living in expanded awareness, waiting to be reunited with those they love. But wait, there's something else the dead desperately want you to know, and it's so important that it appeared in over half of Cayce's death-related readings. They see your life purpose clearly. In a case that stunned researchers at Cayce, Cayce channeled a deceased businessman who provided his living son with specific guidance about a career change that seemed financially risky. The father could see from his expanded awareness that this path would lead to both material success and spiritual fulfillment. When the son followed this guidance despite family objections, he built one of the most successful companies in his industry. Here's what's incredible about this pattern. The deceased consistently demonstrated in Cayce's readings that they could see their loved one's highest potential and life purpose with crystal clarity. Death had removed the limitations of physical perspective, allowing them to perceive the perfect unfolding of each person's spiritual mission. The archives contain case after case where the deceased provided specific career guidance, relationship advice, and life direction that led to extraordinary outcomes when followed. They understand that every person incarnates with specific lessons to learn and gifts to share with the world. But here's what will blow your mind about how this actually works. They influence your dreams to guide you. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, Cayce documented numerous cases where the deceased appeared in dreams to provide crucial guidance, warnings, or comfort to their loved ones. But these weren't just random dream visits. They were carefully orchestrated communications designed to help the living make important decisions. In one verified case, a widow received detailed instructions through dreams from her deceased husband about investments that saved her family from financial ruin during the Great Depression. The specificity and accuracy of this guidance amazed even Cayce's most skeptical associates. The archived readings reveal that the deceased understand dream states as optimal times for communication because the conscious mind's resistance is lowered. They can more easily impress important information, provide comfort during difficult transitions, and offer guidance about upcoming challenges. Think about this carefully. That vivid dream you had about your deceased loved one might not have been just your subconscious processing grief. According to Cayce's documented findings, it could have been an actual visit with specific information meant to help you navigate your current circumstances. The dying process is actually beautiful. In readings conducted for families watching loved ones transition, Cayce consistently accessed information showing that the actual moment of death involves profound spiritual experiences invisible to physical observers. The dying person often sees deceased relatives, experiences overwhelming love and peace, and gains immediate understanding about their earthly life's purpose and meaning. A documented case from 1938 involved a woman whose husband was dying of cancer. Through Cayce's reading, she learned that her husband was already spending time in spiritual realms during his unconscious periods, meeting with deceased family members and preparing for his transition. When he finally passed, his face showed such peace that the attending physician remarked he'd never seen anything like it. But here's what the deceased want their loved ones to understand about this process. Physical death is often a relief after prolonged illness, and the actual crossing over involves experiences of such beauty and love that they wouldn't return to physical limitations even if given the choice. They want their families to stop fearing death and instead understand it as a graduation to expanded awareness and capabilities. They work together to help the living. One of the most fascinating patterns in Cayce's archives involves deceased family members working together from higher realms to assist their living relatives. In multiple documented cases, entire groups of deceased relatives collaborated to help solve problems, provide opportunities, or protect their loved ones from harm. In a case that amazed researchers, Cayce channeled information about 3 deceased brothers working together to help their living sister find her missing child. They provided specific locations to search and influenced helpful people to be in the right places at the right times. The child was found safely exactly where the deceased brothers had indicated. This reveals something extraordinary about consciousness after death. The deceased maintain relationships with each other and actively coordinate their efforts to assist the living. They form spiritual support networks that transcend individual concerns and work collectively for the highest good of their earthly families. Your spiritual development affects them. Here's something that appeared consistently in Cayce's readings that will change how you view your daily choices. Your spiritual growth and moral development directly impact your deceased loved ones. When you evolve spiritually, it creates positive effects that reach into higher realms and actually helps their continued development. In documented cases, the deceased expressed gratitude when their living relatives engaged in prayer, meditation, service to others, and spiritual study. These activities created energetic connections that supported both the living and the dead in their respective growth processes. But here's the flip side that shocked many of Cayce's clients: negative behaviors, spiritual neglect, and moral decline by the living could create disturbances that affected their deceased relatives' progress. This isn't punishment, but rather the natural result of consciousness being interconnected across all levels of existence. The message that came through repeatedly was that spiritual development is never a purely individual endeavor. It affects everyone connected to you, both in physical and spiritual realms. They understand karma and soul lessons. Throughout thousands of readings, Cayce accessed information showing that the deceased gain complete understanding of karmic patterns and soul lessons that were often unclear during physical life. They could see how relationships, challenges, and opportunities were perfectly designed to facilitate spiritual growth. In one remarkable case, a deceased mother communicated through Cayce that her difficult relationship with her daughter during life had been necessary for both souls' development. She could now see how their conflicts had forced both of them to develop patience, forgiveness, and unconditional love. What had seemed like family dysfunction was actually spiritual curriculum designed by their souls before incarnation. This expanded awareness allows the deceased to forgive completely, understand perfectly, and appreciate the spiritual perfection in even the most challenging earthly experiences. They want their loved ones to develop this same perspective while still in physical form. Medical conditions have spiritual meanings. In thousands of health readings, Cayce consistently accessed information showing that physical illnesses often reflect spiritual imbalances or karmic patterns. The deceased, with their expanded awareness, understand these connections and often attempt to communicate healing insights to their living loved ones. A documented case involved a man with chronic digestive problems whose deceased father communicated through Cayce that the illness stemmed from harbored resentment and unforgiveness. When the man addressed these emotional patterns, his physical symptoms resolved completely. The archives contain numerous similar cases where the deceased provided specific insights about the spiritual roots of physical conditions. They understand that true healing often requires addressing consciousness patterns, not just physical symptoms. But here's what's most important about this understanding. The deceased want their loved ones to know that illness can be a pathway to spiritual awakening when approached with the right perspective. Physical challenges often catalyze the spiritual growth that souls came to Earth to achieve. The Sleeping Prophet's work continues to offer hope, healing, and spiritual understanding to anyone ready to explore the mysteries of consciousness and the eternal nature of love. Edgar Cayce discovered that when a person dies, their spirit experiences complete shock upon first seeing their physical body from above. In 1936, he told a grieving mother in Virginia Beach that her recently deceased son was standing right beside his own casket, confused and desperately trying to wake up what he still believed was himself. The spirit kept attempting to re-enter the body for 3 full days before accepting the reality of death. But here's what's even more shocking about this case. The boy's spirit could see and hear everything happening around his body. He watched his mother cry. He tried to comfort her, reaching out to touch her shoulder, but his hand passed right through. He could see the funeral preparations, hear every conversation, and witness every tear shed in his honor. Yet nobody could see or hear him back. This revelation came from one of Cayce's most documented readings about the immediate aftermath of death, and it completely transforms everything we thought we knew about consciousness and the moment of transition. What Cayce discovered about those first moments after death will change how you view your own spiritual journey forever. If you're ready to discover the hidden truths about consciousness that even modern science is just beginning to understand, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. This information has been suppressed for decades, but the documented evidence from Cayce's 14,000 readings proves these experiences are absolutely real. The Sleeping Prophet's most disturbing reading about death came when a wealthy businessman from New York visited Virginia Beach in 1934. This man had lost his father suddenly, and he desperately needed to know what happened to souls immediately after they leave the body. What Cayce revealed during that trance session shocked even his longtime stenographer, Gladys Davis. According to the archived records from that session, Cayce described how the newly departed spirit hovers near the physical body for anywhere from 3 to 7 days. During this time, the consciousness is in a state of complete confusion. The spirit knows something fundamental has changed, but the connection to physical reality remains so strong that they cannot immediately accept their new state of being. But wait, here's where it gets truly extraordinary. Cayce explained that these spirits can perceive everything happening in the physical world with crystal clarity. They see their loved ones grieving. They witness the medical procedures. They observe every detail of their funeral arrangements. Yet they exist in a state of profound isolation because they cannot communicate back to the living world through normal means. In documented cases from the 1930s, Cayce described spirits becoming increasingly frantic as they realize their attempts to touch, speak, or interact with their physical surroundings produce no results. Imagine the horror of watching your own funeral while desperately trying to tell everyone that you're still conscious, still aware, still very much alive in a different form. This creates what Cayce called the first spiritual crisis. The newly departed soul faces a choice that will determine their entire afterlife journey. They can either accept their new reality and begin moving toward the light, or they can become trapped in what he termed the earthbound state. Here's what Cayce discovered in one of his most disturbing readings about spirits who refuse to let go. During a session witnessed by multiple ARE members in 1938, Cayce described a spirit who had been earthbound for over 50 years. This soul had died in a train accident but refused to accept death. For 5 decades, this consciousness remained trapped near the physical plane, desperately trying to return to a body that had long since turned to dust. The spirit could see the world changing around him. He watched as horse-drawn carriages were replaced by automobiles. He witnessed the construction of new buildings where familiar landmarks once stood, yet he remained frozen in the moment of his death, unable to move forward in his spiritual evolution. Cayce explained that these earthbound spirits often attach themselves to living people who share similar emotional frequencies. They seek to experience physical sensation again through these human connections. This phenomenon explains many cases of what people today call spiritual oppression or negative energy attachments. But here's the truly shocking revelation that Cayce shared about consciousness and death. The sleeping prophet discovered that human consciousness doesn't actually reside in the brain. Instead, our awareness exists in what he called the soul body, a perfect energetic duplicate of our physical form. This soul body contains all of our memories, personality traits, and conscious awareness. When physical death occurs, this soul body simply separates from the material vessel. The consciousness remains completely intact, which is why spirits can think, remember, and perceive with the same clarity they possessed in life. In fact, Cayce's readings suggest that consciousness actually becomes more vivid and expansive after death, not less. This explains why spirits react with such shock when they first see their physical body. They feel completely normal and fully conscious, so the sight of their motionless physical form creates cognitive dissonance. It's like looking at a car you've been driving and suddenly realizing you're standing outside of it. In verified cases from Cayce's archives, spirits often described feeling more alive and aware than they had felt in years of physical existence. Colors appeared more vivid, thoughts moved more quickly, emotional experiences intensified dramatically, yet the inability to interact with the physical world created intense frustration and confusion. Wait until you hear about the case that terrified even Cayce's closest assistants. A woman from Richmond contacted Cayce in 1935 after her husband's sudden death from a heart attack. During the reading, something unprecedented happened. The deceased husband actually began communicating directly through Cayce's trance state, bypassing the usual spiritual intermediaries that Cayce typically worked with. The spirit spoke with desperate urgency, describing his experience of watching his wife discover his body. He had been standing right beside her the entire time, trying to explain that he was okay, that death wasn't what either of them had expected. But she couldn't hear him, couldn't see him, couldn't sense his presence at all. What made this reading particularly disturbing was the raw emotion that came through Cayce's voice. The stenographer noted that Cayce began crying during the session, something that rarely happened during his medical readings. The deceased man's anguish at being unable to comfort his grieving wife came through with heartbreaking clarity. This changes everything about how we understand the moment of death and the immediate afterlife experience. Cayce's readings reveal that the first few days after death are crucial for the soul's spiritual progression. During this transition period, the consciousness must make peace with releasing all attachments to physical existence. Spirits who successfully navigate this period move on to what Cayce described as the first heaven, a realm of learning and spiritual preparation. But souls who remain attached to earthly concerns, unfinished business, or intense emotional connections can become stuck in what metaphysical teachings call the borderland. These spirits exist in a gray area between physical and spiritual reality, unable to fully experience either realm. According to documented cases in the ARE archives, earthbound spirits often experience time differently than we do. What feels like hours to them might be days or weeks in our reality. This temporal distortion adds to their confusion and makes it even more difficult for them to understand their true situation. Here's the most important revelation that Cayce shared about helping spirits transition successfully. The sleeping prophet explained that living people can actually assist departed souls during this critical transition period. Through prayer, meditation, and direct spiritual communication, we can help confused spirits understand their situation and encourage them to move toward the light. Cayce described specific techniques that families could use to help their deceased loved ones. These methods involved creating what he called spiritual bridges, energetic connections that allow clear communication between the physical and spiritual realms. In one documented case from 1939, a mother successfully helped her deceased son realize his true situation through these techniques. During a follow-up reading, Cayce confirmed that the young man had successfully transitioned to the spiritual realm and was now serving as a guide for other newly departed souls. But wait, there's something even more extraordinary about what happens to consciousness after this initial transition period. Cayce's readings reveal that once spirits accept their death and move beyond the earthbound state, they enter a realm of unlimited learning and spiritual growth. In this dimension, consciousness can access what he called the Akashic records, a cosmic library containing all knowledge and experience from throughout human history. Spirits in this realm can instantly understand complex spiritual truths that took them decades to grasp during physical life. They can communicate telepathically with other souls, experience multiple locations simultaneously, and even visit different time periods to understand the full scope of their soul's journey. According to Cayce's documented readings, these advanced spirits often return to help living humans through dreams, meditation experiences, and intuitive guidance. They serve as invisible mentors, helping us navigate our own spiritual development while we're still in physical form. This is why Cayce always emphasized that death is not an ending, but a graduation to a more expanded state of consciousness. The most profound implication of Cayce's revelations about spirits and death consciousness relates to how we should live our current lives. If awareness continues with complete clarity after physical death, then every thought, action, and intention we have right now is building the foundation for our afterlife experience. Spirits who lived with love, compassion, and spiritual awareness transition smoothly and quickly to higher realms. But souls who focused primarily on material concerns, harbored resentments, or ignored their spiritual development often struggle during the transition period. Cayce's readings suggest that we can prepare for a smooth death transition by developing our spiritual awareness while we're still alive. Regular meditation, prayer, service to others, and study of universal spiritual principles all help create the consciousness patterns that lead to successful afterlife navigation. In documented cases from the 1940s, Cayce described spirits who had spent their lives in spiritual development. These souls experienced death as a joyful liberation rather than a shocking disruption. They immediately recognized their new state, quickly released attachment to their physical form, and moved eagerly toward their next phase of soul evolution. Here's what this means for your own spiritual journey right now. Every moment of spiritual growth you achieve today directly impacts your death experience tomorrow. When you develop your intuitive abilities, practice unconditional love, or serve others selflessly, you're literally programming your consciousness for a smooth afterlife transition. Cayce explained that souls who understand these principles while alive often become spiritual guides after death, helping other newly departed spirits navigate their own transition periods. This creates a beautiful cycle where spiritual growth in life translates to service opportunities in the afterlife. The sleeping prophet's most hopeful message about death came through his readings about what he called soul reunions. According to archived records from multiple sessions, spirits who successfully transition beyond the earthbound state are eventually reunited with loved ones who preceded them in death. These reunions occur in what Cayce described as recognition moments, where souls instantly remember their eternal connections to each other. Unlike earthly relationships, which are often complicated by ego conflicts and misunderstandings, these spiritual reunions involve pure love and complete acceptance. But here's the revelation that changed everything for grieving families who consulted with Cayce. The sleeping prophet explained that love connections between souls never actually end. When someone you love dies, that spiritual bond remains intact and continues growing even after physical separation. Your deceased loved ones maintain awareness of your life journey and often work behind the scenes to provide guidance and protection. In verified cases from his archives, Cayce described deceased family members influencing job opportunities, relationship decisions, and even health outcomes for their living relatives. These interventions happen through what he called soul magnetism, the natural attraction between consciousness that share deep love connections. This means that death never truly separates us from the people we love most deeply. Instead, it simply changes the nature of our relationship from physical interaction to spiritual communion. What Cayce discovered about consciousness and death reveals that we are all far more than our physical bodies. We are immortal souls temporarily using material forms to gain experience and wisdom. Death is simply the moment when we remember our true spiritual nature and return to our natural state of expanded awareness. The spirits who react with shock to seeing their own bodies are experiencing the last moments of their identification with physical limitation. Once they release this attachment, they discover capabilities and awareness far beyond anything they experienced during earthly life. Every reading that Cayce gave about death and consciousness points to the same fundamental truth. We are spiritual beings having human experiences, not human beings hoping for spiritual experiences. Physical life is the classroom, death is graduation day, and consciousness continues eternally, growing and evolving through countless dimensions of existence. If these revelations about consciousness and death have opened your mind to new spiritual possibilities, make sure you subscribe to discover more hidden truths from Edgar Cayce's documented readings. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand that death is not the end, but the beginning of an incredible new chapter in consciousness evolution. The Sleeping Prophet left us over 14,000 documented readings that prove beyond doubt that consciousness survives physical death. These aren't just comforting beliefs, they're verified spiritual facts that can transform how you understand your own immortal nature. Your awareness, your love, your soul essence will continue long after your physical body returns to dust. But here's the most controversial revelation that Cayce shared about spirits and physical death, one that challenges everything mainstream religion teaches about the afterlife. In documented readings from 1937, Cayce described cases where spirits actually chose to return to physical life immediately after death. These weren't near-death experiences where the body was revived. These were complete deaths where the soul had fully separated, viewed their body from above, and then made a conscious decision to re-enter their physical form. According to archived testimonies from witnesses at Virginia Beach, Cayce described a businessman who had been declared dead for over an hour. His spirit had gone through the entire shock process of seeing his body, accepting his death, and beginning to move toward the spiritual realm. But when he perceived the devastating impact his death would have on his young children, he chose to return. The man's spirit literally fought its way back into the physical body, restarting the heart and restoring brain function. When he regained consciousness, he described in perfect detail everything that had happened in the hospital room during his absence, including conversations between doctors and the exact time his wife had arrived. This case proves that consciousness has far more control over physical death than medical science acknowledges. Cayce's readings suggest that in many cases, the soul makes an active choice about whether to continue in physical form or transition to spiritual existence. What's even more shocking is what Cayce revealed about spirits who witnessed their own cremation or burial. In one of his most disturbing documented readings, Cayce described a spirit's reaction to watching their physical body being lowered into the ground. The newly departed soul experienced what he called phantom pain as dirt was thrown onto the casket. Even though they were no longer connected to the physical form, their consciousness still maintained such a strong identification with that body that they felt every sensation of burial. This phantom connection explains why Cayce always recommended that families speak directly to their deceased loved ones during funeral services. He insisted that the departed consciousness can hear every word spoken at their memorial, and desperately needs reassurance that they are loved and that their life had meaning. According to verified testimonies in the ARE archives, spirits who received this direct communication during their funeral transition much more smoothly to higher spiritual realms. They carry with them the comfort of knowing their earthly existence was valued and their love connections remain unbroken. The Sleeping Prophet's most controversial teaching about death involved what he called soul preparation techniques that could be practiced while still alive to ensure a smooth transition experience. Cayce explained that people who regularly practiced astral projection or out-of-body experiences during life had much easier death transitions. Since they were already familiar with existing outside their physical form, the shock of seeing their body from above was minimal. He recommended specific meditation practices that involved consciously separating awareness from physical sensation. These techniques literally train consciousness to operate independently of the material body, making death feel like a natural expansion rather than a traumatic separation. In documented cases from the 1940s, students who had practiced these techniques reported death experiences filled with joy and anticipation rather than shock and confusion. They immediately recognized their expanded spiritual abilities and eagerly embraced their new form of existence. This knowledge gives you the power to transform your own death experience from traumatic transition to triumphant graduation. Every moment you spend developing spiritual awareness today directly impacts how smoothly you'll navigate the most important transition of your soul's journey. Death is not something to fear. It's something to prepare for with excitement, knowing that the greatest adventures in consciousness await us on the other side of physical existence. When your time comes to see your own body from above, you'll understand that you haven't lost anything. You've gained everything. Throughout history, one question has haunted humanity. When we die, do our physical sufferings follow us into whatever comes next? For most of us, this question remains purely philosophical. But Edgar Cayce, the most documented psychic in American history, claimed to have the answer, and it's more complex than anyone imagined. Between 1901 and 1944, from his modest home in Virginia Beach, Virginia, Edgar Cayce gave over 14,000 documented psychic readings that would fundamentally challenge our understanding of life, death, and everything in between. Among the most profound were his insights about the relationship between physical illness and the soul's journey after death. What he revealed challenges everything we think we know about healing, consciousness, and eternal life. According to Cayce's documented teachings, physical illnesses themselves don't follow us after death because they're tied to the physical body, which returns to dust. But something far more significant does carry forward: the mental and spiritual patterns that created those illnesses in the first place. This discovery revolutionized how we understand the true nature of healing. But before we dive deeper into this revelation, we need to understand who Edgar Cayce really was and why his teachings continue to influence millions of people worldwide. Born in rural Kentucky in 1877, Cayce discovered his unusual abilities as a young man when he entered a trance-like state to cure his own chronic laryngitis. What started as personal healing soon became a lifetime of service to others, seeking answers to life's most pressing questions. What made Cayce unique wasn't just his psychic abilities, but the meticulous documentation of every reading he gave. Stenographers recorded his exact words, and these transcripts were carefully preserved and are housed today at the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. This means we have an unprecedented record of spiritual teachings that can be studied, analyzed, and verified. When it came to questions about illness and the afterlife, Cayce's readings were remarkably consistent across decades. He consistently taught that most physical ailments originate from what he called spiritual imbalances, patterns of thought, emotion, and spiritual development that manifest as physical symptoms. In his worldview, the body serves as a learning laboratory for the soul, and illnesses are often the soul's way of drawing attention to lessons that need to be learned. According to Cayce's philosophy, every soul comes into each incarnation with specific purposes and lessons to learn. These purposes often involve overcoming particular weaknesses or developing certain spiritual qualities. Physical illness, rather than being random misfortune, serves as one of the primary vehicles through which these lessons are learned. For example, Cayce's readings consistently indicated that conditions affecting the heart often relate to lessons about love, either learning to love more freely, to receive love more openly, or to heal from the wounds of love withheld or betrayed. Digestive disorders frequently connected to difficulty digesting or accepting life's experiences, often rooted in worry, fear, or resentment. Joint and bone problems often reflected inflexibility in thinking or inability to adapt to life's changing circumstances. But here's where it gets fascinating. Cayce explained that when we truly heal these deeper patterns, not just treat symptoms, but address the spiritual root causes, we heal at the level of our eternal being. This means the healing transcends physical death and becomes part of our soul's permanent growth. What happened in his readings, that proved this theory would astound even the most skeptical minds. Throughout thousands of documented sessions, Cayce repeatedly described how souls carry forward their learned wisdom and spiritual development from lifetime to lifetime. He taught that what he sometimes called the Akashic records, the soul's complete record of all experiences and growth, contain not just our experiences, but our spiritual development, including any deep healing we've accomplished. According to Cayce's teachings, when a soul masters a particular lesson through dealing with physical illness, that mastery becomes permanent. If someone develops genuine patience through dealing with chronic pain, learns authentic compassion through caring for others, or discovers true inner strength through overcoming physical limitations, these spiritual qualities become permanently integrated into their soul essence. The physical illness served its purpose and is no longer needed in future incarnations. This concept revolutionizes our entire understanding of suffering and healing. Rather than viewing illness as punishment or random misfortune, Cayce's readings present it as purposeful spiritual curriculum designed by the soul itself for its own advancement. However, Cayce also warned about what happens when we ignore the spiritual lessons our illnesses offer. If we focus solely on suppressing symptoms without addressing the underlying spiritual growth opportunities, those unlearned lessons remain in the soul's pattern. They may not manifest as the same physical illness in a future lifetime, but the spiritual imbalance will seek expression through whatever means serve the soul's continued learning. The unresolved pattern might appear as different physical conditions, challenging relationships, or difficult life circumstances, all designed to present the same spiritual lesson in a new form. This is why Cayce always emphasized holistic healing, addressing body, mind, and spirit together. His readings consistently showed that true healing requires understanding the spiritual purpose behind our physical challenges. He would often recommend not just physical remedies like dietary changes, exercises, or treatments, but also specific mental attitudes to cultivate, emotional healing work to undertake, and spiritual practices to develop. The beauty of Cayce's approach was its integration of practical and metaphysical wisdom. He never suggested that people should ignore medical treatment in favor of spiritual approaches alone. Instead, he advocated for what we might now call integrative healing, working with qualified physicians while simultaneously addressing the mental and spiritual aspects of any condition. In Cayce's documented teachings about reincarnation, he explained that souls choose their circumstances, including health challenges, before each incarnation. These choices are always made in service of spiritual growth and what he called karmic balancing, the soul's opportunity to heal, learn, and evolve beyond past limitations. This doesn't mean that souls deliberately choose suffering for its own sake. Rather, they choose experiences that will provide the maximum opportunity for spiritual advancement. A soul that has struggled with anger in past lifetimes might choose circumstances that will help it develop patience and forgiveness. A soul that has been selfish might choose experiences that cultivate compassion and service to others. The implications of this understanding are profound. It suggests that every health challenge we face is actually an invitation from our higher self to grow spiritually. Rather than being victims of random illness, we're active participants in our soul's evolution. The physical symptoms, while real and requiring proper treatment, are ultimately temporary teachers, pointing toward eternal spiritual development. This perspective can transform how we relate to illness and suffering. Instead of asking, "Why me?" we might begin to ask, "What is this experience teaching me?" Or, "How can I grow through this challenge?" This shift in perspective often becomes the first step toward genuine healing at all levels. Cayce's readings also revealed that healing at the soul level benefits not just the individual, but contributes to collective human evolution. When we transform our deepest patterns of fear, anger, or separation into love, forgiveness, and unity, we're healing something that extends beyond our personal experience. We become part of what he called the healing force that elevates all of consciousness. One of Cayce's most revolutionary concepts was that consciousness itself is the bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. He taught that our state of consciousness, our thoughts, emotions, and spiritual awareness, directly influences our physical health. By elevating our consciousness through spiritual practice, meditation, prayer, and service to others, we can literally transform the patterns that might otherwise carry forward after death. This understanding places tremendous power in our hands. We're not helpless victims of inherited conditions or karmic debt. Instead, we're empowered spiritual beings with the ability to consciously participate in our own healing and evolution. Every moment of choosing love over fear, forgiveness over resentment, or service over selfishness becomes an act of spiritual transformation. But Cayce emphasized something crucial that many people miss in their enthusiasm for spiritual healing. Spiritual healing doesn't mean we should ignore medical treatment or assume all illness serves a spiritual purpose. He consistently recommended working with qualified physicians, following proper medical protocols, and taking practical steps to support physical healing while simultaneously addressing the mental and spiritual aspects of any condition. Cayce's approach was remarkably balanced and practical, even while dealing with the most profound metaphysical concepts. He understood that we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, which means we need to honor both aspects of our nature. Neglecting the physical while focusing only on the spiritual can be just as limiting as treating only symptoms while ignoring deeper causes. According to his documented teachings, the soul's journey between lifetimes involves what he described as a review and integration process. During this period, which varies in duration based on the soul's development and the intensity of the most recent incarnation, souls process and integrate all the experiences and lessons from their earthly life. This review process is not judgmental in the way many religious traditions suggest. Instead, it's a time of understanding, integration, and planning. Souls review their experiences with complete understanding of the spiritual purposes behind even the most challenging events. The pain and limitation of illness are seen in their proper context, as temporary experiences that serve the soul's eternal growth. During this between-life period, souls also plan their next incarnation if they choose to return to Earth. This planning involves selecting the circumstances, relationships, and yes, even the physical challenges that will best serve their continued evolution. The key insight from Cayce's readings is that nothing is chosen randomly or as punishment. Every aspect of a soul's incarnation is carefully selected to provide maximum opportunity for spiritual advancement. Cayce's vision of the afterlife suggests that souls continue to evolve and learn, but from a state of greater understanding and freedom from physical constraints. The pain and limitation of illness serve their purpose in the physical realm, but have no place in the soul's continued existence beyond death. Instead, the wisdom gained through those experiences becomes part of the soul's eternal treasure. This understanding offers profound comfort to anyone facing serious illness or caring for loved ones with chronic conditions. It suggests that while the physical journey may be challenging, every moment of growth, every act of love, every instance of forgiveness or courage becomes part of our eternal spiritual heritage. But perhaps most importantly, Cayce's teachings emphasize that we don't have to wait until after death to experience this spiritual liberation. As we learn the lessons our challenges are teaching us, as we heal the deeper patterns behind our physical symptoms, we begin to experience greater freedom and joy, even while still in physical form. In his later readings, particularly during the 1940s as World War II raged around the world, Cayce increasingly emphasized that humanity was entering a new phase of spiritual evolution. He suggested that souls incarnating during this period often come with the specific mission of transforming old karmic patterns both individually and collectively. According to these teachings, many of the health challenges we face today represent opportunities to heal not just personal karma, but ancestral and collective patterns that have affected humanity for generations. When we heal with this broader perspective in mind, our individual transformation contributes to the healing of our families, communities, and even the world. This expanded understanding of healing adds profound meaning to every health challenge we face. We're not just healing for ourselves, but for all those who came before us and all who will come after. Our courage in facing illness, our dedication to learning its lessons, and our commitment to healing at the deepest levels becomes a gift to all of consciousness. Cayce also taught about what he called soul groups, collections of souls who incarnate together lifetime after lifetime, playing different roles to help each other learn and grow. Often, our most challenging relationships and our most difficult health issues provide opportunities to heal and evolve with these soul companions. Understanding this broader context can transform our experience of illness from isolation to connection. We begin to see that our challenges are not evidence that we're alone or abandoned, but proof that we're deeply connected to a vast network of souls, all working together for mutual evolution. The ultimate message in Cayce's teachings about illness and death is one of hope, empowerment, and profound love. We're not helpless victims of either disease or death, but eternal spiritual beings using temporary physical experiences for permanent soul growth. The universe itself is structured to support our evolution, and every experience, no matter how challenging, serves this ultimate purpose. Your physical illnesses don't follow you after death, but the courage you develop in facing them becomes eternal. The patience you learn through chronic pain transforms into permanent spiritual wisdom. The compassion you develop through suffering becomes an unshakable part of your soul's essence. The love you express despite limitation transcends all boundaries of time and space. This is perhaps Edgar Cayce's greatest gift to humanity. The understanding that every challenge we face in this physical realm serves our soul's eternal journey toward greater love, wisdom, and spiritual wholeness. Death is not an ending but a graduation, and the lessons learned through physical experience become the foundation for continued growth in dimensions beyond our current understanding. As we face our own health challenges or support others facing theirs, we can take comfort in knowing that nothing is wasted, nothing is meaningless, and every moment of sincere effort toward healing and growth contributes to our soul's eternal treasure. The question isn't whether our illnesses follow us after death, it's how we'll transform our current challenges into the spiritual gold that enriches our eternal journey. How will you transform your current challenges into eternal treasures? How will you use your experiences of limitation to develop unlimited spiritual qualities? How will you allow your temporary physical journey to serve your permanent spiritual evolution? The choice, as Edgar Cayce consistently taught, remains always yours. And in that choice lies the ultimate power of human consciousness, the ability to transform any experience, no matter how challenging, into spiritual advancement that benefits not just ourselves, but all of creation. But understanding this profound truth is just the beginning. Living it requires a fundamental shift in how we approach every aspect of our health journey. Cayce's readings provide practical guidance for this transformation that goes far beyond theoretical understanding. According to his documented teachings, the process of spiritual healing through illness involves what he called attunement, aligning our thoughts, emotions, and actions with divine love and purpose. This isn't a one-time event, but an ongoing practice that gradually transforms not only our relationship to illness, but our entire experience of life. Cayce consistently emphasized that healing begins with forgiveness, both of ourselves and others. He taught that resentment, anger, and unforgiveness create energetic blocks that can manifest as physical illness. When we hold grudges or harbor bitterness, we literally poison our own systems. But when we choose forgiveness, we release these toxic patterns and allow healing energy to flow freely through our being. This doesn't mean we condone harmful actions or become doormats for others' bad behavior. Rather, forgiveness is an act of liberation, freeing ourselves from the burden of carrying others' mistakes and our own perceived failures. It's choosing our own spiritual freedom over the false satisfaction of righteous anger. In his readings about the relationship between emotions and physical health, Cayce revealed connections that modern science is only beginning to understand. He taught that every emotion has a corresponding physical vibration, and chronic emotional patterns literally reshape our cellular structure over time. Fear weakens the immune system, worry creates digestive problems, and anger inflames the entire body. But the reverse is also true. Positive emotions and spiritual states create healing vibrations that restore balance and vitality. Love, joy, peace, and compassion generate energy frequencies that promote healing at the cellular level. This is why Cayce so often prescribed attitude adjustments alongside physical treatments. One of the most powerful aspects of Cayce's healing philosophy is his teaching about the role of service in spiritual transformation. He consistently indicated that souls who focus on serving others, even while dealing with their own health challenges, often experience accelerated healing. This isn't because service earns divine favor, but because serving others helps us transcend the limitations of self-focused suffering. When we're caught up in our own pain and problems, we can become trapped in cycles of self-pity and despair. But when we look beyond ourselves to help others, we tap into a source of strength and purpose that transcends physical limitation. We discover that we're more than our bodies, more than our illnesses, more than our temporary circumstances. Cayce taught that every soul has unique gifts to offer the world, and these gifts often become more refined and powerful through the experience of overcoming challenges. The person who has struggled with depression may develop extraordinary compassion for others' emotional pain. Someone who has battled addiction might become a powerful healer for others caught in similar patterns. The individual who has faced life-threatening illness often develops a depth of spiritual wisdom that can inspire and guide others. This understanding transforms suffering from meaningless burden to meaningful purpose. We begin to see our challenges not as punishments or random misfortune, but as opportunities to develop the specific qualities our souls came to cultivate. Every difficulty becomes a chance to choose love over fear, faith over despair, hope over resignation. According to Cayce's teachings, the souls who make the greatest spiritual progress during incarnation are often those who face the greatest challenges. This doesn't mean that suffering is necessary for growth. Rather, that souls who are ready for accelerated development often choose more intensive learning experiences. They're like advanced students taking graduate-level courses instead of repeating elementary lessons. But here's what makes Cayce's perspective so hopeful. He taught that as we master these advanced lessons, we graduate to higher levels of spiritual existence where suffering becomes unnecessary. The soul that has learned patience through pain no longer needs painful experiences to maintain that patience. The soul that has developed compassion through hardship carries that compassion as a permanent quality. This is why Cayce was so emphatic that true healing must address the spiritual root causes of illness. When we heal only at the physical level without learning the deeper lessons, we miss the opportunity for permanent transformation. The same patterns may reassert themselves later in this lifetime or in future incarnations because the underlying spiritual imbalance hasn't been resolved. But when we approach illness as spiritual curriculum, when we ask what qualities we're meant to develop, what patterns we're meant to heal, what service we're meant to offer, we open ourselves to healing that goes far beyond the physical. We begin to heal at the level of our eternal being. Cayce also taught about the importance of what he called ideals, our deepest values and purposes that guide our choices and actions. He indicated that souls who have clear, spiritually aligned ideals heal more rapidly and completely, because their entire being is organized around growth and service rather than self-protection and limitation. Setting a spiritual ideal isn't about perfection or rigid adherence to religious doctrine. It's about choosing a quality or purpose that calls forth our highest nature. It might be love, service, wisdom, healing, peace, or any other quality that resonates with our soul's deepest purpose. When we align our thoughts, words, and actions with this ideal, we create coherence in our energy field that promotes healing at every level. Perhaps most remarkably, Cayce taught that as we heal spiritually, we often find ourselves drawn to help others with similar challenges. The person who has overcome addiction may feel called to addiction counseling. Someone who has healed from trauma might become a therapist or spiritual counselor. The individual who has navigated serious illness often develops healing abilities or becomes an advocate for others facing similar challenges. This isn't coincidence. It's the soul's natural expression of its expanded wisdom and compassion. When we transform our pain into purpose, when we use our healing to help others heal, we complete the spiritual circuit that makes our suffering meaningful and our recovery permanent. The ultimate vision in Cayce's teachings is of humanity gradually awakening to its true spiritual nature. He saw our current age as a time of unprecedented opportunity for both individual and collective healing. The challenges we face, whether personal illness or global crises, are all opportunities for consciousness to evolve beyond old patterns of fear, separation, and limitation. Every person who chooses healing over hurt, forgiveness over resentment, service over selfishness, contributes to this collective awakening. Every individual who transforms their illness into wisdom, their pain into compassion, their limitation into spiritual strength, becomes a beacon of hope for others facing similar challenges. This is the deeper answer to whether our illnesses follow us after death. The illnesses themselves dissolve with the physical body, but the love we've learned, the wisdom we've gained, the service we've offered, the forgiveness we've given, these become part of our eternal spiritual heritage. They're not just personal achievements, but gifts to all of consciousness. Your journey through illness, whatever form it takes, is not just your story. It's part of humanity's larger story of awakening to its divine nature. Your healing becomes a source of healing for others. Your courage inspires courage in others. Your transformation contributes to the transformation of the world. This is Edgar Cayce's most profound gift, showing us that every challenge is an opportunity, every limitation is a doorway to freedom, and every ending is actually a new beginning. Death doesn't end our story. It simply turns the page to the next chapter of our eternal spiritual adventure.